Karen parked in my barn again, then called 911 when I locked her in. They always say don't poke a rancher unless you're ready to deal with the fence. Well, Karen poked me one too many times. Name's Colton Hayes. I run a small ranch out on the edge of what used to be wild Colorado land until the suburbs spilled their cookie-cutter homes too close for comfort. My family's owned this land for 4 generations. What they didn't pass down in cattle, they passed down in grit. 6 months ago, the development company dropped a new neighborhood right across from my eastern pasture. With it came landscaping crews, vinyl fences, and a few folks who understood the country and a lot who didn't. Karen Prescott was the worst of them. She showed up with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and a clipboard full of printed rules she made up herself. She wore a vest that said HOA Compliance Team, like she was the sheriff of a plastic town. The problem? There's no real HOA here. Just a voluntary committee meant to maintain flower beds and host barbecues. But Karen made it her mission to regulate everything, including what happened on my land. It started small. A note on my mailbox about excessive livestock noise. Then another about visual disruption from disorganized haystacks. I ignored them. I don't answer to self-appointed tyrants. Then one morning, I walked into my barn and found her SUV parked next to my tractor. I blinked twice. Thought maybe she was lost, but there it was, blocking the feed path, right in front of the stalls. I checked my cameras. She drove in like she owned the place. No note, no permission. I locked the barn doors and waited by the gate. When she came out sipping coffee from a mug that said, "Boss lady," I asked her, plain and calm, "Ma'am, did you mean to park in my barn?" She smiled like I was a child. I assumed it was community space. Our HOA map shows this structure is within visual easement jurisdiction. "It's on my deed," I said flatly. "That makes it mine." She didn't flinch. "Well, I've reported you for non-compliance with external structure maintenance. You'll be receiving a fine." That's when I knew this wasn't confusion. This was control. The second time it happened, I warned her. Left a sign, "Private property. Trespassing will result in vehicle immobilization." She tore the sign in half. The third time, she parked even deeper inside next to my hay bales, and she left behind a notice taped to my tack wall, "Official HOA storage violation citation, unregistered agricultural tools present. Penalty pending review." That's when I locked her in. I waited until she went inside her SUV checking her phone, probably writing her next fake citation, and I slid the heavy barn doors shut, bolted them from the outside. Then I called the sheriff, and that's when the real show began. Karen didn't honk right away. For the first 3 minutes, she just sat there in her SUV like a queen waiting for the peasants to come groveling. It wasn't until she realized the barn doors wouldn't budge that she started laying on the horn like the devil himself had cornered her. I stayed out by the fence, leaning on a post with my arms crossed. Jet, my old cattle dog, sat at my feet, head tilted. Every honk made his ears twitch. After 5 full minutes of noise, Karen's voice rang out, muffled but shrill. "You're breaking the law, you're kidnapping me." I didn't move. Sheriff Timmons was on his way. When dispatch answered my call earlier, I'd explained everything calmly. Karen Prescott's trespassed onto my property for the 3rd time. She parked in my barn again. I locked the doors for safety and containment. "You've got footage." There was a pause, then laughter. "Colt," the dispatcher said, "you didn't hurt her, did you?" "No, ma'am," I replied. "Just secured the structure. Sheriff's already en route." When the cruiser pulled up, Karen's voice hit a new pitch. She pressed herself against the slats of the barn side wall like it was prison glass. "Officer, help, I'm being illegally detained." Sheriff Timmons, a wiry man with a no-nonsense walk, turned to me. "She break in again." "3rd time," I said, handing him the flash drive from the security camera. This time, she brought forged HOA paperwork and parked next to my feed bins. "Damaged 2 hay bales in the process?" He shook his head. "You lock her in, secured the barn. I figured better that than towing her car with the Massey Ferguson." He cracked a smile. "Let's get this sorted." When he unbolted the door and stepped inside, Karen came charging out like a bull in heels. He assaulted me by locking me in Timmins, didn't flinch. Ma'am, are you injured? No, but he imprisoned me. That's illegal. This isn't public land, he said flatly. It's a private barn. On deeded property, you trespassed, and he used reasonable force to prevent further damage. That's not false imprisonment. That's restraint due to repeated property violations. Karen blinked like someone had splashed cold water in her face. I am the HOA director. He's not in compliance. There is no legal HOA here, Timmons replied. Only a voluntary community committee, and it does not include agricultural structures outside residential zoning. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. Ma'am, he continued, I'm writing you a citation for trespassing and property damage. I suggest you have your car removed within the hour. You'll regret this, she snapped. Timmons raised a brow. Unlikely. She stormed off toward her SUV, and for a few seconds, the only sound was gravel crunching under expensive tires. That night, I thought it might be over, but Karen didn't retreat. She regrouped. At 2:00 a.m., I was woken by the sound of a truck backing up down my driveway. I pulled on my boots and stepped out with a flashlight. Two men were unloading wooden stakes, plastic fencing, and a large vinyl banner. When I got closer, I saw what the banner said. Future site of Cedar Ridge Ranch, HOA Agricultural Compliance Center. I laughed. Out loud. You've got to be kidding me. One of the guys, young, nervous, held up his hands. We're just here to install the signs. Lady paid us $50 each and said the land was being reclassified. She lied. I pointed to the gate. Pack it up and tell her to stop trying to build an empire on someone else's dirt. They left without another word. The next morning, a new flyer appeared on everyone's doorstep. Colton Hayes is in violation of new community rules. Unauthorized agricultural use may result in HOA sanction report. Fence height and livestock. Noise immediately signed Karen Prescott, interim agricultural HOA compliance officer. I couldn't believe it. She wasn't just lying, she was manufacturing a fake system around me. So I did what any rancher would do when varmints burrow deep. I started digging back. It turns out Karen's so-called HOA committee didn't just operate on paper. She'd built a shell website, created a P.O. box under the name Cedar Ridge Oversight, and filed a phony community organization with the County Business Bureau, one no one else knew existed. I brought it all to Sheriff Timmons. He whistled through his teeth. That's impersonation of authority, mail fraud, and unlawful filing under false pretense. Want me to press charges? Absolutely. But Karen wasn't done. She was planning something bigger, something more than just signs and flyers. Because 2 days later, I found blueprints tacked to my barn door plans for a proposed community resource annex filed with the town council, stamped with her fake organization, claiming my barn as abandoned. That's when I realized she wasn't just harassing me. She was trying to take my land. And now it was war. There's something sacred about a deed. That piece of paper is more than just legal jargon. It's blood, legacy, and sweat sealed in ink. My great-grandfather signed the original back in 1924. The barn she tried to claim built by hand, plank by plank, by my grandfather and his brothers after the war, and Karen Prescott. She tried to wipe that all away with a printer and a rubber stamp. The blueprints she tacked to my barn door were official, looking at a glance zoning maps, diagrams, even a public use proposal. But when I looked closer, it was all smoke and mirrors. She'd forged a community reclassification stamp and filed the documents with a junior clerk at the county annex under a nonprofit she created, Cedar Ridge Oversight and Agricultural Standards Committee, CROAC. The acronym sounded like a Soviet throwback, but the intent was worse. She was trying to get my land rezoned, without my knowledge, without my signature, without my permission. She wanted my barn declared abandoned and converted into a shared resource hub, which, in Karen speak, meant hers. That morning, I drove to the county office in my old Ford pickup, slapped the documents on the counter, and asked one question: who the hell approved this? The clerk, a guy in his 20s with headphones half hanging from his ears, scanned the forms, then blinked. I think this was filed through the citizen upload portal. We didn't approve anything. Just time-stamped the file. He turned to the office manager. She took one look and said, "That's not legal. That's, actually, that's a felony." I nodded. "Mind if I borrow a stapler? I've got a sheriff to visit." Sheriff Timmons took one look at the file and laughed. But then his face changed. "This isn't just trespassing anymore," he said. "This is property theft. If she's trying to change zoning codes without you or council approval, she could be facing real jail time." We filed charges for filing false zoning documentation, impersonating a regulatory entity, forgery, attempted real property fraud. I handed over security footage, screenshots of her website, and copies of the forged paperwork. But we both knew what this meant. Karen wasn't just playing HOA queen. She was staging a land grab. That night, I sat on my porch with Jet beside me, watching dusk settle over the barn like a protective quilt. I thought about my dad and his old saying, "Land don't fight for itself. You've got to speak for it." So I did something I'd never done before. I made a video. Just me, the barn behind me, one camera. I kept it simple. "My name's Colton Hayes. This barn has been in my family for 97 years. Karen Prescott has been harassing me, trespassing, and now she's trying to steal it. This isn't about community improvement. It's about control, and I won't be silent about it anymore." I posted it to Facebook. By morning, it had 18,000 shares. 3 days later, it hit 2.1 million views. People from all over the country chimed in: farmers, veterans, single moms, law students, folks who'd been bullied by HOA Karens in their own neighborhoods. Same thing happened to my dad. She just wore pearls instead of a vest. These fake HOAs are getting out of hand. You stood your ground. Colton, we need more of that. Then came the local news. A reporter knocked on my door. Mic in hand, I let her in. She stood in the barn as I showed her the spots where Karen's tires had crushed feed bins, where she'd nailed signs to the support beam, where hay had molded because she'd blocked airflow. "Do you feel safe?" she asked. I looked around. Safe, sure. But this ain't about safety. It's about principle. The story aired that night. Local rancher battles fake HOA over barn seizure scheme. That's when the tide really turned. Two things happened within 48 hours. The County Board of Commissioners launched an investigation into Karen's filings. 3 more neighbors came forward with claims. One had been fined $75 for using a riding mower outside compliance hours. Another was told her clothesline violated HOA aesthetic codes. The last, an elderly man. He'd paid Karen $200 to remove a tree that blocked community light. She never returned, but she did send a receipt with a fake tax ID. That was the final straw. We gathered on my front porch that weekend. Me, Sheriff Timmons, the 3 neighbors, and Jules, a retired property attorney from 2 miles down. We formed what we called the Land Defense Committee. Our mission: expose Karen, legally dismantle her fake organization, reclaim every dollar stolen, and make sure she never did this again. And as we sat around sipping black coffee and planning our next steps, Jet barked once sharp. Alert. We turned. Karen's SUV was cruising slowly down the road. She didn't stop, but she saw us, and we saw her. The next time she came up my driveway, she wouldn't be leaving on her own terms. 3 days after our front porch meeting, the first official notice landed in Karen's mailbox: cease and desist, unauthorized filing and misrepresentation of zoning authority, signed by the County Board of Commissioners. The hammer had finally dropped. Most people would have stopped there, retreated, lawyered up, maybe apologized. But not Karen. No, she doubled down with the arrogance of someone who thought the rules never applied to her. That same afternoon, a mass email hit the inboxes of everyone within the Cedar Ridge district. "Mr. Hayes is misleading the public. The barn in question is clearly within visual jurisdiction, and all attempts at dialogue have been rebuffed. As a courtesy to our community, We will be launching a legal defense fund to secure community space for civic use. She included a link to a fake GoFundMe. She was asking for money to sue me, and worse, within 24 hours, she raised over $900. That night, I sat on the porch with Jules and Timmons, our laptops open, documents everywhere. She's not just a control freak, Jules said, scrolling. She's a full-blown con artist. Timmons leaned forward. You said her name popped up on that land title filing site again? Yep, I replied. Under a new entity, Cedar Civic Cooperative. Same P.O. box, same language, different name. She's trying to rebrand before she gets shut down and cash in one last time before it all falls apart. I added, that's when Jules pulled up the terms of her GoFundMe page and shook her head. She listed herself as a registered nonprofit. That's a felony. You can't collect public funds under a fake charity. Timmons cracked his knuckles. Well then, let's give her the welcome she deserves. The next morning, the county attorney filed a motion for fraudulent misrepresentation, and the GoFundMe page was flagged and frozen by noon. Karen's fundraiser was dead in the water, but her damage wasn't. My inbox was flooded with messages, some angry, some confused. Karen had been parading around the neighborhood claiming I was the problem, that I'd stolen public property and imprisoned a woman without cause. She even claimed the sheriff was in on it. It wasn't just a smear campaign, it was a scorched earth tactic. So we responded. On Saturday morning, the Land Defense Committee hosted a public town forum on my property open to everyone, with coffee and hay bales for seats. I opened with one sentence. You don't get to rewrite history just because you printed a sign. Then Jules presented all the evidence. The fake filings, the barn seizure documents, the unauthorized donations, the trespassing charges, the 3 previous fraudulent organizations Karen had registered across the state. Every document was projected onto a canvas, visible to all. One woman in the front row raised her hand. Why didn't anyone stop her sooner? Jules said it best, because shame is a powerful silencer, and people like Karen use it like a leash. That line hit hard. People cried. One man admitted he'd paid Karen to approve a chicken coop in his backyard, even though he owned the land outright. Another woman said Karen told her that voting against HOA resolutions would impact her mortgage. It was abuse, plain and simple, and we were finally saying it out loud. That Monday, the county prosecutor issued a formal criminal complaint against Karen Prescott, including wire fraud, false impersonation of public authority mail fraud, attempted land seizure, criminal mischief, unlawful confinement claims made under false pretenses for the 911 call. The sheriff's department executed the warrant the next morning. They didn't even need sirens. Karen was arrested on her front lawn, still in her bathrobe, waving a manila envelope and yelling, "I am the HOA." The moment hit the news within hours. The clip of her shouting while being placed in the cruiser went viral faster than wildfire in summer. And right there, behind her on the lawn, one of her signs fluttered in the wind. Order through accountability, HOA leadership for a better tomorrow. The irony was so thick, it nearly choked the internet. But the real reckoning came 2 weeks later in the courtroom. Neighbors packed the benches. Karen showed up in a gray pantsuit, hair pulled back like a wannabe politician. The judge didn't waste time. Miss Prescott, you fabricated authority, misled your neighbors, committed multiple acts of fraud, and attempted to seize private property through deceit. You're not just guilty, you're dangerous. Her sentence: 2 years in county detention, $15,000 in restitution to the victims, lifetime ban from creating or managing any civic organization, mandatory psychological evaluation before future community involvement. And just like that, the queen of HOA tyranny was dethroned. The barn is still standing, stronger than ever. And now, folks come by to visit not with flyers or fines, but with stories, with casseroles, and with questions about what to do when someone abuses fake power. And every time, I say the same thing: you fight back with truth, and you never ever let a clipboard scare you. But there was still one thing left to do. Rebuild the trust. It's strange how quiet peace feels. After months of honking, trespassing, forged citations, and courtroom drama. The only thing I heard that morning was the creak of the barn door as I slid it open. Sunlight spilled across the hay-stained floor like a blessing. Jet wandered in behind me, tail wagging, sniffing the air as if even he could tell the tension was gone. Karen was gone. Sentenced. Removed from the community. The false HOA disbanded. Her signs torn down. Her name, now synonymous with fraud and petty tyranny, was off every mailing list. And the P.O. box she used had been closed by federal order. But healing a neighborhood doesn't happen with a gavel. It starts with small steps. The first was mine. I offered the use of my barn voluntarily, this time for a neighborhood gathering. No politics, no committee, just folks, potluck style. Jules helped hang string lights. Sheriff Timmons brought chili. The kids from down the road brought guitars and a speaker. We called it the No Fine Picnic. No one wore badges. No one gave orders. And when one of the older ranch wives stood up and read a poem about land and legacy, there wasn't a dry eye in the barn. We weren't just neighbors anymore. We were survivors of something uglier than zoning disputes, abuse, hiding behind fake authority, and we weren't going to let it happen again. A few weeks later, the Land Defense Committee officially transitioned into the Cedar Ridge Community Trust, a volunteer coalition with one rule: no power, just presence. We offered legal education about property rights. We hosted workshops on spotting fraud, dealing with real HOAs, and defending your deeds. We even created a pamphlet titled, "Is This Real? How to Spot a Fake HOA?" Jules helped get it printed through the county's legal outreach office. By winter, it had spread to 5 other towns, places where fake enforcement had crept in just like Karen's did. One afternoon, I got a letter from a rancher up in Montana. Heard what you did down there. Had a woman try the same thing here, wanted to fine me for letting my cows graze near her vacation rental. Thanks for making noise. You gave folks like me a voice. That one hit hard, because that's what Karen tried to take from us all, our voices. And by locking her in that barn, by refusing to back down, we didn't just get justice. We got our voices back. Now, the barn door stays open more often than it used to. People stop by just to talk. Sometimes about fencing, sometimes about weather, sometimes about how to deal with their own Karens. They ask what made me finally act, and I tell them it wasn't the fake fines. It wasn't the parking. It wasn't even the lies. It was the moment she thought she could take something that didn't belong to her and use fear to make it stick. Because the thing about people like Karen is, they rely on silence. But the moment you speak, they lose. Have you ever been intimidated by someone pretending to have power? Have you seen neighbors bullied in the name of rules that weren't real? Have you ever questioned whether you were allowed to say no? Then let this be your reminder. You don't need a title to defend your truth. You don't need a badge to protect your land. And you're never alone in the fight for dignity. Share your story. Speak your piece. Because one voice at the right time can echo louder than 1,000 fake rules. We did. Now it's your turn.